What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Roots and Streams podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Llamas, and thank you, as always, for just tuning in, watching. I know there's a handful of regulars. Don't have necessarily a ton of subscribers, but it's not necessarily like I'm doing marketing or working on this actively. I'm just recording, being faithful to that, and whoever is hearing these messages, I hope that it's something that is at least interesting, but hopefully helping you to just get a little bit encouraged, whether you're just encouraged through my journey or hearing about it and maybe what it might mean for, life as you experience it right now and whatever you're going through. So just thank you, as always, for listening in. I know a lot of people probably just skip over all of this. And last week's episode, it was a little long. This one we're going to keep shorter for one reason. I have to go pick up my son in about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So we will be staying under that. And the last one was just like dumping everything that was on me. And it was pretty heavy. It was very nice to share as much as I could. And to realize that, there are probably other people that are going through it, and financial worries and what's next and in my career or just future, anticipating what may or may not happen can always be like filled with anxiety sometimes. And so I just know that some of us are going through that. So it was nice to share, and hopefully people felt encouraged, or if not, just that they're not alone from that. So I'm going to continue kind of where I left off two episodes ago, of continuing the reading plan I've been on. This may sound super boring, but to kind of recap is that I'm kind of trying to get an idea of what the arrival of Jesus may have meant for Israelites in that time when Jesus showed up on the scene, right? Not being somebody who has all of the studies and culture and everything of an Israelite, a Jewish person, it doesn't mean the same for me. So, I've read a lot of the Bible, probably the entire Bible, but I wanted to pinpoint. And so I got a plan to like pinpoint some reading that would help me to focus on the history points that would have been screaming at them, and they would have been noticing when somebody like Jesus came on the scene. So that's what I'm going to be going through. And I think a lot of it where I'm reading right now is reflecting, at least to me. And I'm not someone who's big on, the end of the world is happening. Jesus is coming soon. And soon, what's soon? Tomorrow, what's soon? 2,000 years from now, 100 years from now, it's all soon, quote unquote. I'm not somebody who's big on that kind of, kind of end of the world kind of stuff. So you won't find that in this, but I just find it interesting how I hear people talk about how stories in the Bible can speak to like what we're going through today. And a lot of times when I would read old stories, it didn't seem like there was any kind of, not sure how that adds up, because that's kind of extreme, or that's not something I can necessarily relate to, because we're reading it in these different wars and times, and it's just so foreign. And the cool thing about taking some time in this reading is about taking some of those foreign things and meditating on them, studying them a little bit deeper, not just reading through each chapter. It's allowed me to notice that, hey, maybe there are some things that are repeating here, or maybe some of these things are really speaking to the human experience and how it's just constantly happening. It just doesn't look the same. And I'm going to dive into that and touch on some of these stories that I've been reading on. So I'm going to pick up where I left off last time. So the Israelites have chosen to put their faith in a king instead of God, and God's okay with it. So he anoints a king and gives them a king. And now they're at a time where Solomon, one of the kings, has some really strict laws and high taxes, and a group of the people, a group of the country, of this Jewish country of Israel, of the people, don't necessarily agree with it, and they're very upset with it, and so they break off. So I want to touch a little bit about division. I know it's a topic right now that is, we see it happening and people are talking about it happening, and then what to do about it happening. What's the right thing to do about this division? But my side is right. It's not about division. It's about who's doing the right thing. And, when I first read these stories, I was mostly focusing on the history and trying to paint a picture of what it meant for them. It wasn't until I started to unpack and talk it through, especially with my wife, what I was reading, that I started noticing some similarities to what we're experiencing today. Again, I'm not saying, it's end times and the Bible says that this is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's interesting how even for society, 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, we're seeing similar things still happening today. And a lot of times we think that we're better and we have more things figured out and technology and, we understand the mind more, but it's just interesting how maybe we haven't come as far as we thought, or maybe those ancient stories can speak exactly to where we are today. It's just interesting. And so there is a split in the country, and this is when the kingdom of Israel splits. So now we have a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. As I was reading this, so this is in 2 Kings, I want to say 17. Again, there's a lot of jumping around in my reading because really just trying to get the highlights. And when I read it, I was like kind of confused. Like, why is it saying the northern kingdom, southern kingdom? Wasn't a lot of explanation. I had to look it up. So that was the split. They just didn't agree on politics. They didn't agree on like taxes. And it was a division of the people. So now you have this northern, and it's like the area of Samaria, and there's a king up there, and there's a southern king of Judea, and a little bit more on that. So if you've ever heard of like the Good Samaritan, you probably have heard of that phrase, and the Good Samaritan in the Bible. So that's kind of the area of where that those people come from, the Samaritans, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit. But this is way before, like, they were seen as people that, Israelites and God's people didn't want to even speak with or be seen with. And I'm talking about when Jesus talks to the Samaritan woman and the Good Samaritan. When Jesus has stories that talks about how provocative it was to interact with those people. So this is like the early times before those people were seen that way. It's like this whole other people, but it's the kind of seed of that. And so there's these two kingdoms, and I promise I'm setting up something that's very interesting. So stick with me. I'm just doing my best to try to do the story justice so it makes sense. And then when I kind of break into the similarities, that makes sense as well. It's just a lot of reading. Not a whole lot of reading, just a lot of info that I'm trying to process and make it make sense. So come on, Matt, make it make sense. Here I go. So two kingdoms, they're divided. They're not in agreement. I think that's kind of saying like the division that's happening today, perhaps there's some overlap there. And this makes them vulnerable. I think when we divide as people, it makes us vulnerable to our enemies, vulnerable to people that want to take advantage of us. Right? When a family that is maybe very, very well off and they're great people, they don't do bad things, but there's probably people that see them in other families that necessarily aren't so well off, or they are equally well off, but they just despise them because they see so much happiness. But once they see some division, they see some weakness, they see some cracks in that, they say, this is the time. I've always hated that family that looks so happy, and I knew they weren't perfect. Look they're fighting against each other. What if I kind of just, put a knife in between them and say, hey, here's a knife. Just do something with the knife. And And so we're so susceptible. I'm 100%. I am telling you, I'm probably the last person that's like conspiracy theory things. However, there are entities, countries, organizations, groups of people that don't want to see certain other groups of people succeed. And I'm not saying it's only happening now. I'm just saying whenever you can make some group of people start to divide and disagree with each other, it's so much easier to just, now attack each of them. And they're definitely weaker separate than they are together. And I think it's just interesting how much division is happening right now over so many hot topics, whether you're talking about ICE and how they are dealing with people here that are here, without paperwork and just violent and just post after post of people being mistreated. And there seems to be a lack of justice going on, and there's division on that, right? Like, so, well, these people are here illegally, and so they're taking up resources and such, and other people, well, God says that, to treat the foreigner, with respect and to welcome them, and they shouldn't necessarily even be seen as a foreigner, and to love everybody, right? So you just have these, I'm not saying one is right or wrong. You can have your opinion. I'm not here to disagree right now and cause more division. I do understand that I'm just saying there's two views, right? And then we have the whole Charlie Kirk thing, and geez, that's a really hot one too. And I've had to talk about it more than I would like, about whether you were for him and he was, pushing the kingdom forward and bringing peace on earth, or he was bringing more division and making the country worse. Right. And it's ongoing Donald Trump, and whether or not you agree he's making America great again or he's not making America great again. Abortion, right? There's just number of things. And actually, I remember saying this. Interesting memory just came to me. I remember saying this in a Bible study with other men. And it was around political season the last time Donald Trump was running. And there was so much tension around, I don't know if, I think it was about like immigration or abortion, one of those hot topics. And it just dawned on me like how much energy and how much division was coming from these people talking about it, and how much like essentially like anger and just a lot of negative spirited things coming out. And it just made me dawn on me like, okay, sure, there could be one right thing and view. But I remember putting it out there of saying, what are the chances are that the accuser, Satan, evil, right, opposite of goodness and love of God, whatever you want to categorize that as, is using that as kind of like bait, right? As that topic, instead of us seeing where we have some overlap and how we can both address a topic that seems like, we're just coming at it at different views. It's like the first thing we go to is division. And maybe it could even be a test from God. And I think there's a thin line between, spiritual warfare or being the accuser and Satan versus like God testing us. And then we got the test and temptation thing. I just think it's I think it's interesting. So division, right? Israel at a time was being divided because of politics, because of taxes, and then they divide. And now they're being kind of overpowered by outside forces. So in this story, so now they have this king. Now they have two kings. Say they had one, and it's like, no, we're going to get our own king. That's how the northern. And so the southern region, it's kind of an important note here, just biblically. I learned the southern one is the kingdom of Judea. So this is the one that's going to be carrying on the promise and the seed from King David. And if you're a Bible nerd at all, or you know anything about the Bible, it's just that God promised through King David that we would be sent a savior. We would be sent the Son of God. We would be sent someone who would bring his forever enduring kingdom on earth, right? That's pointing to Jesus. So I just point that out, that the southern region was the one that was more connected and probably even saw themselves as better because they were connected to the line of David. The other one got a different king. And so we have the Assyrians coming in at a time where there's a lot of division, and the Assyrians come in and then they're bullying. They're pretty much the mafia, right? So they're a big, stronger country that's coming in, overpowering all of the country, so north and south. And essentially, there's like, you can keep running the way you're doing things. Just know that we're more powerful, and we need you to pay tribute to us. And just pay tribute. Don't do anything wrong to us, and we won't mess with you. But we're kind of in charge here, like the mafia maybe would of a small mom and pop shop, and they can keep running business, keep doing their life, but always know that you need to pay tribute to us. And so the northern region, they kind of don't pay a couple of times, and they conspire against the Syrians with Egypt. And so this sends Assyria, like, it didn't take much, right? I don't think it takes much to necessarily tick off the mafia, at least according to movies that I see. There's not many chances to, wrong the mafia and then you're like, you're okay, don't worry, you get another chance. Well, they wrong Assyria, and the Assyrians come and they completely destroy northern Israel. They come in and they exile, so they take some of their people and send them to their own to Syria. They kill the rest, and now Assyria is pretty much populating this northern Israel area, and south is still like, hey, you still need to know that we're in charge. Like, we're not going to destroy you, but you're still going to pay tribute. So what's interesting happens is that these Assyrians are now populating northern Israel, but they're like experiencing a lot of, like, it seems like it's saying like natural disasters, like a lot of lack of favor, famine. And they're like, what's going on? Like, why is the God of this land against us? Like, how do we appease this God? How do we, make sure this God is happy so we can stay in this land? And so what Assyria does, the kingdom sends back some Israelites that they had pulled away and they were using to show the Assyrians how to fear God, how to fear Yahweh, their God, to be sure that they can receive favor in that land. And so they show them. However, the Syrians are now bringing in their own rituals and gods and their own ways of worshiping other idols and statues. However, the Israelites are also showing them how to fear God. And so it says in there that they fear God, and they're worshiping other idols and doing other rituals, including, like, this is so terrible, right? And they are sacrificing children. So one of their gods, Baal, I guess, required sacrifice of children, and they would do this. So the Israelites are doing this. So they're like mixing in their like culture, their religion, their spirituality, their everything with these Assyrians, because they essentially rule that area. And so now it's mixing in. And I find it interesting how, that division caused right there to be a takeover of an outside force. And then now they're having to fear God at the same time, worship God, their God that they've been worshiping and took them out of slavery and through the wilderness. And they're just like, well, just as like insurance to make sure that we do get fertility, we do get our crops taken care of, we want to also worship these other gods of fertility and weather and water and these other gods, just like, just to be sure, right? And just to show loyalty to the Assyrians. However, I found that so ironic, because the first commandment is that we were to worship Yahweh, God, and only God, and have no other idols or gods. So they're saying that they were fearing God and doing these other things. Well, you can't really do both. And this is another topic that I found is, and I want to point out that I read these things. I was studying the history, painting a picture, kind of understanding what's going on, the logistical things of like north, south. And it wasn't until after, I was like, but what did I get from this? Like, what does it mean? Like, I was just sitting with it and just like even coming back to my desk, and I guess not much, but it started to dawn on me like, and talking to Sandra too, like how we sometimes can be a point in our life where we are chasing money, chasing success, and just saying, I still believe in a God. I still believe in God, and I still fear God, and I don't fear anyone else. But our actions and our day-to-day rhythms are not showing that we fear God. And other idols have so softly kind of snuck into our world, and so we can so easily be manipulated. I think it's harder to recognize now. I think there is nuance. I'm not here like with a megaphone saying like, everybody repent, and you worship money. However, I know that I have had times where my fear in not having enough money was greater than my fear that I'm worshiping God and making sure that I know that He has goodness set for me in my life, and that I shouldn't have to necessarily worry so much to the point where it's changing who I am and what I'm doing, because I'm so afraid of finances. And so I think those times can be like kind of a nuanced idol, like culture fitting in, right? Like I want to serve God and I think God is great, but I also want to sleep around with women because, my friends think that I should, and my friends are seeing like kind of making fun of me if I haven't slept with a girl yet. But, I still show up to church and I fear God. I think, like, he's essential, right? Like that brand essential, like I fear God above all else. Or, fighting with people on social media or just that division, and just still claiming to be fearing a God who is all about love. I just found that interesting how I saw so much overlap, seeing them. And when we just think of like worshiping idols and statues, I think sometimes, at least I'll speak for myself, we think about it as this like ancient, like foreign thing of bowing down to this physical statue. And it sounds so like elementary, like I don't know how else to explain it, but it seems so like weird and strange, something unrelatable. Like, why would I ever bow down to some weird statue? And now it's like, what does that look like today? What does bowing down to idols? And what do idols look like today, right? I think they could be people, they could be money, they could be culture, they could be fitting in, especially for doing it in a posture of, I'm doing it because I want to fit in. I want to be accepted. I want to be successful. I want to have influence. I want to have power. And that's exactly what was happening to these Israelites. They were being oppressed by this outside kingdom that was making them bow down, and probably not even forcefully, but they were changing the way they went about their life day to day, maybe changing what careers they would take, maybe even changing how they would they would dress and speak, because they wanted favor from this kingdom that seemed more powerful, instead of trusting that their God was more powerful and not changing what they were doing. So I'm hoping that's kind of making sense. And one of the parts in there was the children's sacrifice. Okay, this is I definitely don't mean to be provocative for the sake of just like this being clickbait or anything like that, but it truly came from unpacking this with my wife. And I was like, I wonder about, and I was actually done like studying this, about to sit down. And I remember thinking like, but what about like, how is the child sacrifice thing relatable? Like, we don't do that anymore. Not even close. That's like barbaric. And then like something hit me. It's like, but we're still in a sense doing it by sacrificing our children's innocence, and sometimes even like mental health, for the sake of fitting in and culture. Now, I'm not saying all social media is bad and all electronics and media is bad for kids. Of course not. I think it's just that it's so nuanced, right? That we have to really pay attention now about like how and why we do things. Like, is my daughter watching TikTok because I want her to fit in? I don't know how to say no. It's what everybody's doing. It's a part of the culture. However, what's the effect it's having on her as a person? Am I allowing that part of her to kind of be sacrificed in a way? And I get it. I'm not saying we're consciously doing that and throwing your child into a fire and seeing them burn. It seems different. It seems foreign, but to them, they thought it was going to bring them favor and they were fitting in with the culture. It's just, and again, I'm trying to walk a thin line here. It just like, and I can maybe only speak for myself, and I'm trying to. I don't want to accuse anyone of their parenting at all. But I know there was a time for us and our kids, we were just being really loose with that because we wanted them to fit in, but we were trying to put on some settings, but we saw changes happening in their personality. And then like had a tough time. It like felt so guilty pulling it away because that's what culture and our society was saying you need to do to fit in, and everybody's doing it. And I remember like I had an internal battle of like, I just need to put my foot down and just say no. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? And I'm very thankful for like Tim Ross, who is somebody I see as a mentor. I've never met him in person, but would listen to his podcast like the first 2 years, like faithfully, and hearing him, the way he raised his boys. It's like, all right, at least I see someone else doing it, someone that's very wise. And that I think he doesn't even like let his kids like have social media or anything until they're like 18 or something like that. I'm not sure exactly all the rules, but it's something like that, because he realized the effect and the temptation that it has on adults. Imagine for young people. And so I just wonder how much we're trying to fit in. And I'm not saying like be this strict parent, but maybe we can just take a moment and say, does this make sense? Like, is it really worth allowing that like doom scrolling for my kids, so that they are like, what is the benefit of that versus, something else that they could be doing or you could be doing with them? I thought it was interesting. Like Sandra even said something like, the way kids can definitely, like we're seeing it from social media and bullying. Sometimes, I hate to even say it, like, but take their own lives. And I just wonder if there is any kind of I'm not trying to spread any fear. I'm just kind of like processing. It was me and Sandra processing it. I'm not trying to say every parent, again, I'm just trying to be super careful with this, because it's like Matt says we're bad parents because we allow our kids to be on social media. I'm not saying that. However, I for ourselves, we had to take some time and think about, does this make sense for our kids? And now like thinking about reading through these stories, it's like something is always after our children. Something is always after the resource that our children is, like the resource that they're going to be, the promises and power that our bloodline is, like our generations to come. There's power in that, right? So like if you can tap into that, then right, whoever is tapping into that through you or through the choices we're making is gaining that power. And this is like, I'm speaking on a spiritual, like economical, like global, like all the old practical thing here. Even in education, and I had to deal with this and realize it, of a lot of the education and a lot of the systems that are there. Again, I'm not a conspiracy person. I feel like I'm having to repeat myself because I want people to think like Matt's just this crazy Christian guy. Maybe I am. And sorry if you're listening this long and you want to tune out now, that's fine. But when I was in education, like it dawned on me, like STEM, yes, I get it. Like sciences and technology and art and the mix of that is important. But then I saw the companies that are pushing it and not that they're evil companies, but they have agendas. Like Google wants to make sure they have more brilliant employees coming in to keep making like their technology projects. So what do? They tap into the education systems, and they have some say on the curriculum that is there. And we've all felt it, that schools can kind of get tunnel vision about our careers and our skills. And just saying, like, there's always things, and whether it seems mal or not, but I think that sometimes we can just take a moment and be like, okay, what's my priority as a Christian? What's my priority as a follower of Christ, as somebody who's trying to be or understand it, somebody, or maybe you're not even that far, somebody who's just like cares about their children and wants them to be good people. Like, and that's my priority. So what does that look like, as we take steps in like education and in participating online, and am I just giving in to fit in, right? Or am I just going along with the culture, going along with businesses because there's money in Google and I want my child to work for Google or for Disney to, because all my hope is going into those things? Or can we also make some decisions here? And that's really what the story, as you see me unpacking it, was pointing at. And it's kind of sad because in this story that the Israelites are experiencing, so the Syrians take over the north. Now I'm like tying it back in because I see I'm already pushing 30 minutes. Now the Babylonians come in and they take over everything, right? They completely, so Israel is just not doing good. They're divided. They're worshiping other gods. Yahweh doesn't see too much of a reason to keep, working with them and not kind of handing them over to the things that they're doing wrong. And so they get handed over to the Babylonians. However, the Babylonians make mistakes that I think are very interesting. And I think God was definitely working in the details here. And so the Babylonians actually remove the king and they capture the king that's in the southern kingdom, right? The one that's part of the promise of the son to come, the one that's going to be God's son. They remove that king 3 months into it. And it's like Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim. I'm butchering it. So they remove him and they have him captured for some years. And then they go and destroy the rest of like the southern kingdom. They kill the king. They slaughter his sons in front of him. They rip out his eyes. It is horrific. Like the Bible, if you want some Halloween horror stories, go read like 2 Kings chapter 25 of all the people that get killed, eyes being gouged out, sons being killed in front of their father. Is pretty bad. So the Babylonians are doing this. However, they also captured a king. So that king was replaced by this other king that's being killed now. So there's this king that's just sitting in exile with the Babylonians in prison. And now the Babylonians are going in and completely destroying them, except leaving remnants of, so like pieces, like people left over. And they just leave like the little guys. They just leave like the farmers. We're just going to leave the wine dressers, the vine dressers. So like the wine people that take care of like the grapes and everything. Like we'll just leave them. They're just these poor little people. And it's interesting how like these points are written because like those remnants, those little pieces that are just left because they're unimportant, are the exact people that God later uses to rebuild that kingdom. And so that's talked about a lot by Jesus, how like the poor and the outcast are super important, if not the most. Because they're ultimately the ones that end up rebuilding and carrying on legacies. So that's interesting. So they leave that there. And that is ultimately like, this is like God saying like, there is still hope, even though everything's being destroyed, even though it seems like you've lost everything, to destroying the temple, stealing all your treasures. And then there's just this king that's sitting in prison. And it's like God just winking and saying, there is still hope. So in these stories, as we see everything destroyed, there's still hope. And so no, I am truly a believer. And you're like, Matthew, you're just a conspiracy guy. You're just a guy who's saying the world's going to end. I get it. And I'm also saying, well, I wasn't saying that. And I try to be as clear as possible. I am saying that God's playing chess, not checkers. So even in our divisions, even in social media, destroying our children's brains, I believe that we serve a God that is playing chess. Even if we're maybe being destroyed and we don't see it coming, right? Like we're seeing happen to the Israelites. God always has hope in even the worst stories, the worst situations. He is planting things. So same way he pulled out that king, put him in that prison, who actually is now in Babylon after that war, and he's starting to receive favor after being in prison for years and years. Now he has a seat at the king's table, right? So God had a plan. And I think this speaks to now whatever we're going through in our life, and it seems terrible. Our kids are out of control. We're out of control. We're super anxious. And it's like, now I'm just sitting in it and like everything's destroyed. I would say try to take a moment and notice. And if you want to get on like God's level of what his plan is, like start noticing maybe what are some of the remnants? What are some of the pieces of hope that God is leaving through you, through your story, in your children and your children to come? Because in the stories that I'm reading, it is devastating. I think they're warning stories. I think they're pattern stories of the human experience. And one of those patterns is God always makes a way to rebuild his kingdom. He always makes a way to build us up and to keep his work going in bringing love and heaven into this land, into this earth as hard as he can and as powerful as he can. And he does that constantly through all these stories. So I'm wondering, like, what is it that you are going through that you just don't see any hope? Maybe you could take a moment and just pray. It's like, God, show me, like, what is there to hope for? And I hope that he can show you. I hope you can start getting hope in something. If not, know that God will always bring good and use everything that we are going through for good. All things work together for good. And so that's ultimately what I noticed I was getting from the story. Yes, I see warnings. Yes, I see patterns. And one of those main patterns is that even through all this destruction and worry and concern, God is working in the details. So that's something I want to leave with you. Whether or not that made sense, I'm sorry. I do have, quite a few things going on these days, but I do want to stay dedicated to this podcast as it helps me process things. It keeps me close to God. It keeps me in my Bible and studying and just trying to stay like in the details with God in everything I do. All right, y'all. Until next time, peace.